Humans and Cylons presented dilemmas for characters: waterboarding, torture, inhumane prisons, revenge, the words that resonate in these halls and on Galactica. Is it you?
Thank you very much indeed. Waterboarding and torture, Madam President. Shame on you. You have no idea how many times I wanted to say that in this room.
Be my guest.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, Whoopi, you set us off on exactly the right tone when you said that this is not just a building, it's an idea. And indeed, this organization was founded on a very basic idea. Unfortunately, an idea viewed by some these days as being its own science fiction. We have been accused in the United Nations of being a utopian organization. We look at it in a different way. It's true that we are an idealistic organization and that the vision here is of a world order that's based upon international law and international diplomacy as a means of settling disputes. To be sure, it is idealistic, but we don't see it as utopian. In fact, what we see it as is the only reasonable alternative to what would inevitably be I think, horrific dystopian society, the kind of thing that science fiction is so good at representing, the kind of world that we do see in Battlestar Galactica and other very good science fiction work. And the kind of societies, I think, where human dignity is not guaranteed as a matter of right, but where human dignity is granted by authoritarians or equally bad for sale on the market to the highest bidder. Well, this is good timing for this event because only a few months ago we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the founding documents of this organization on the 10th of December in 1948. And when you think about what the world looked like, this world, Earth, looked like at the time that that declaration was adopted, it was not unlike the charred and scarred representations that we saw on Battlestar Galactica as a result of a horrific war that was accompanied by the most extreme forms of human cruelty on a massive scale. And that moment in history provided an opportunity to write a new contract in the way our societies should look, and this is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At the time, it was thought to be a utopian idea. It was a very significant break from the way governments and societies were ordered in the past. Up until that moment, it was thought that every government, as a matter of the internal affairs of states, can do whatever the heck it wants to do to its people. But from that moment forward, here in the United Nations, the message went out that said, absolutely not. There are rules. And those rules apply to all people, in all places, and in all circumstances, regardless of threats, real or perceived. It was also a remarkable document because it laid out not just civil and political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights, all on par. Nelson Mandela said, "We will not be forced to choose between bread and ballots. We will have both in the ordering of our societies." So that declaration, which, by the way, now is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most translated document in the world, which we think is testament to just how universal a document it is. And we in the UN didn't do all those translations. It was the people in the 193 countries around the world that saw this as an important declaration and made the effort to translate it into their languages from Abkhaz to Zulu, as the UN website likes to say. And yet, 60 years after the adoption of that declaration, in these very halls, every single day, we're struggling with many of the same themes that we were struggling with at the end of the Second World War, and really interestingly, many of the same themes represented in Battlestar Galactica. I look at the show and I wonder whether or not you don't owe some royalties to Eleanor Roosevelt, since she wrote this in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights first, because there are so many similarities, not least of all the eternal struggle for the two freedoms, at least, freedom from fear and freedom from want, which after all is a centerpiece, it seems to me, of just about every show that Battlestar Galactica put forward. I think another thing that the two instruments, UDHR and BSG, have in common is certainly this idea of the slippery slope of moral ambiguity, moral relativism, and how easy it is in our societies to compromise on those things that we think are fundamental for ourselves when it comes to talking in particular about the other, We see it these days in the proliferation of Trumps. Things that our own governments want to tell us are more important than the rights that were guaranteed to us in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so suddenly we're presented with this false dichotomy of security versus human rights. And we're told that security is to be defined in terms of old-fashioned notions of state security, right? Rather than what the UN has been trying to sell for 60 years, which is that security is defined as human security. That freedom from fear, freedom from want of every individual, regardless of race, sex, language, religion, is the way that we define security, not what a government says is security. And that slippery slope, I think, shows up so much in the show, and it shows up so much in real life in the world in which we live. I mean, my idea of security, and I know Bob Orr, when he starts talking about the UN's approach to counterterrorism, will look at this as well, but my idea of security is that I want to be free from the fear that a terrorist will hijack an airplane, crash it into this building, and kill me. And I also want to be free from the fear that my government will drag me away in the middle of the night and lock me away because it doesn't like my race or language or religion or political opinion or my idea of its policies. That's security from the point of view of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The show also looks at the issue of economics and the issue of markets, and it helps us to ask the same question that the economic and social rights contained in the Universal Declaration ask, which is, do we really want to be living in societies where our rights are bargained like commodities, that health and education and housing that are so essential to a dignified life are something that can only be bought and sold and not a matter of right, or where our labor doesn't have to be dignified, for example, or where private actors can have so much power that they can deny us our human rights. It's a question that the Universal Declaration asks. It's a question that the show asks as well. The last thing I think I would mention is this idea contained in both instruments of the many chauvinisms that pop up in all of our societies. This idea of the other, defining human beings as being the other so that we can dehumanize them and ultimately destroy them. This is a common theme of our reality, and it is a common theme, as we see, of our science fiction as well. And I think this will explore a little bit more in questions and answers, but this concept of the other, obviously very, very central. We also have something in common here, which is the idea of struggle. We are in a moment right now where not only do we have gross violations of human rights happening in countries around the world, and I would say in 193 countries in the world there are serious human rights problems, but we also have a moment right now where the very idea, as you called it, Whoopi, the very idea of human rights is under assault. The idea that so many other things now trump human rights. That human rights is a quaint old notion from the time of the founding of the United Nations, but these are hard new times, and we need new rules. We need to deal with people in ways that we might not like to, but suddenly we can't pay attention to the rules of human rights, and we absolutely reject that idea as a dangerous concept of moral relativism as well. A dangerous illusion. We are all Cylons. Every one of us is a